This is a Chapter 1 reading of Leech by Hiron Ennes, first released on September 27th, 2022. My full review for this title is available in the link in the description. I hope you enjoy this audio reading. The sight of this old train car saddens me, though I cannot quite articulate why. There's something unnameable about the rattling of the empty wooden seats, so like the pews of a deserted church, that puts me in a lonely humour. It is an unusual feeling, since I have never in my life been alone. Jagged mountains rise and fall outside the window, dotted with white trees and the occasional lodge long since abandoned to the wild. It has been 1 hour and 42 minutes since the last snow-shredded sign of civilization crawled upon the landscape, and it will be 54 minutes before the next appears. This is not accounting for delays, accidents, breakdowns, avalanches, or seismically induced derailments. The only other occupant of the car is a young boy, bundled so heavily he resembles a sphere more than a child. He sits alone because he failed to follow his mother off the train at the penultimate stop, but he does not appear distressed. The conductor had promised to deposit him at the correct station on the return south, and he shrugged in reply, biting shyly at the forefinger of a well-chewed glove. The train stops twice so workers can clear snow from the tracks, adding, according to my timepiece, 41 minutes to the journey. It is not so deep into winter that such delay will prove fatal, but I will arrive on the dangerous side of dusk. Perhaps that is for the better. The man I plan to meet at the station is not likely to be punctual, especially since he does not expect me. He might not even yet know of the death that brings me north. The snow-laden firs bow their heads and shed motes of light as the sun slips between two western peaks. The boy squints out of the window, drawing intricate outlines of mountains in his condensed breath and wiping them away with equal enthusiasm. I study him at play, noting his movements and development, his flushed cheeks, the hectic sores at the corner of his mouth. He is a charming creature. He meets my gaze and reddens, balling his hand in the palm of his four-fingered right glove. I suspect come night time the ride will only get colder, so I remove my own gloves and offer him a trade. Wordlessly, he compares them to his current pair. He slips his hand inside and, finding them to be close enough to his own size, accepts. As the train once again bellows and lurches, his complacent smile reveals dark gaps of missing teeth. He spends the rest of the trip removing the gloves, twisting the fingers in knots, untwisting, reversing them, and wearing them again. By the time my destination comes into view, he is chewing away at one leather forefinger. The train winds to a stop as I bid farewell to the child. I suddenly long to trade places with him, as easily as we had traded gloves. I would like to ride back south in his place, to assume his unworried demeanour, to occupy the capricious brain developing in his skull. Perhaps one day I will. But for now, I must address my own mind. I must follow the eddies of darkness where the flow of my thoughts has been interrupted, where a gap has opened and swallowed a portion of my memory. Only a corpse is left, a body I should have seen die, but whose agonal moments slipped past with nothing but a tense, vague unsettlement. I collect my things and disembark. Workmen drag several dozen boxes of supplies through the snow, and I follow their tracks to the three-walled shack that passes for a railway station. The shelter offers little respite from the cold, and I shiver between crates and containers, massaging a numb forefinger and curling my frozen toes in their inadequate shoes. The train reverses course, black smoke billowing in its wake, and disappears back into the maze of mountains. Silence falls with the dusk, and the encroaching shadow colours the snow an endless, featureless blue. Baker arrives with predictable lateness and in his usual manner. bathed in the exhaust of his snow-treading vehicle, balancing side saddle on a torn foam seat with a small branch of pine, a poor substitute for the cigarellas he has vowed to eschew, poking aslant from his frosty beard. At his back creaks a sled of his own making, a rickety contraption of wood and metal on which he hauls supplies between the station and the town. Suppressing an unexpected pinch of anxiety, I watch him rattle up to the shack, smoke wheezing from the machine's trembling tailpipe. I raise a hand in greeting. Baker slides from the seat. He looks to his left, then his right, as if hoping to find someone who can explain my presence. He, of course, does not recognize me. "You're of the Institute, I suppose," he says. I nod. "Hell of a fast arrival. Been but 2 days back the chateau sent the letter." He speaks hard Franco, and though this young tongue of mine is unused to its phonemes, I am familiar with the language. "Just nae thought, law." "Never mind. I'm Baker." I pretend I do not already know. He extends his hand, and I take it. "You lost a finger there," he says. "Canquist summer gloves in town. Nae far. Any luggage?" "No." He raises a bushy eyebrow. "Sup, crawl in the back. I can come back for these. Wild animals nae stealing the Baron's new porcelain while we're away." He pats a crate with a furred glove and motions for me to climb into the dilapidated sled. When I am safely inside, he blows 2 pillars of smoky, condensed breath from his nostrils and starts the engine. I squint at the rusted track of the machine as it flings oil-stained snow, grooves glinting like knives, and I try not to imagine a body crushed under it, tangled and torn beyond recognition. I know better than to conjure such thoughts, but phobias, like immunities, are acquired early and are difficult to erase. Despite logical input from a conscious mind, a body fears what it fears. The ride is unpleasant, but it is not long. In a few minutes an orchard of smokestacks appear beyond the treetops, ringed by the slanted tin roofs of miners' homes. The pines part, ushering us down a corridor of crooked stone buildings braced with ice. We wind through the snowy streets, past half-buried warehouses, past belching chimneys and pumping turbines that are denied sleep even in the dead of winter, and up the slope of a looming hillside. At its crest we cough to a halt before a wrought iron gate. 2 men emerge from the crumbling guard's hut, one wielding a shovel and the other a rifle. They exchange a few words, glancing at me, then force the gate open on hinges rigid with cold. The taller one waves us in, gun dangling from his shoulder like a broken limb, and we sputter into the unkept frozen ground of the Chateau de Verdure. Of 100 windows, only a dozen are lit. The chateau, likely a sister to the luxury hotels that once dotted these mountains, has mostly crumbled into darkness, its outer wings abandoned to the elements, or repurposed to house animals in winter. Only the central tower, a looming, crooked thing, is alive tonight. It arcs over us, as if bending to allow the single eye of the highest window, the Baron's, of course, to scrutinise approaching visitors. Bathed in the weak light of the manor, Baker leads me up the snowy steps to the oak doors. He raps thrice, and, in a blur of marmot-furred coat, retreats to his vehicle. The engine roars, the gears scream, and he disappears into the dusk. I knock twice more before a maid answers. She narrows her eyes at my inadequate topcoat and unfamiliar face, and wordlessly invites me in out of the cold. Sylvie is her name, but she will introduce herself to me later, after I have proven trustworthy. For now, she saves the smiles and the curtsies, and bids me wait under the jade dome of the foyer. I remove my hat and count the cracks running through the stone to pass the time, but only reach 93 before she returns to present me with the Baron de Verdera's only son, Didier. He barely resembles himself, His handsome face seems to have withered in my short absence, and behind the cracked glass of his pince-nez, his eyes are coloured with fatigue. "You must be the replacement," he says. "I didn't think you'd come for another few days at least. And at this time of evening. Sweetest hell, I hope you didn't walk up from the station." "Baker was kind enough to escort me," I say. "Had I known you'd arrived so quickly, I'd have sent someone to retrieve you, and certainly well before nightfall." He attempts valiantly to smile. "You must be exhausted. I'll have something hot made for you. Come, rest in the salon, and I'll pour you a drink." I peel off my gloves and coat, dropping them into Sylvie's outstretched hands. "I would much prefer to see the body first." "Surely that can wait." "I am afraid not, Sieur." Didier's eyes glide over mine, probing for the reasoning behind my urgency. But I have nothing to offer him. Somehow, I know even less than he does. "If that is what you wish," he says. "We've laid him out in the cold, so... Well, you're no doubt familiar with the process of decay." "I am." Didier lifts an oil lamp from its sconce and bids me follow, unaware that I have travelled these halls for years. He guides me through the distal veins of the chateau, through darkness thickened with cobwebs and dust. We wind down the creaking staircases, past rows of rooms that have not seen occupants in centuries, to a tall, unadorned metal door. "I'll get the houseboy to bring you his old tools if you want to open him up." Didier struggles with the lock for a moment. But with his wound, it's not hard to guess how he died. "I do not remember a wound of any sort. Regardless, I would very much appreciate the tools." He nods and pushes the door open in a wave of freezing air. We step into what may once have been part of a kitchen, but now serves as meat storage. Legs, torsos, and strips and mounds of venison and pork hang from hooks in varying states of disassembly. Steel bars bend across crumbling sections of wall, keeping any wandering carnivores, including hungry townsfolk, from worming their way in. On an iron butcher's table, supine and blue with cold, lies a body familiar to me. At the sight of its sunken face and the dark puncture wound on its neck, a multitude of voices echoes in my mind. Some worried, others calm, all rational. 100 mouths whisper twice as many questions, and for a moment, not the first in my life, though it is rare, I am at a complete loss. "Who is responsible for this?" I ask. "I have no idea," Didier replies. He lingers by the door, eyes averted. "Nobody had anything against him, except for my father, perhaps. But he has something against everyone, and he can barely get out of bed to eat, much less drive a scalpel into someone's throat. I can't help but suspect..." Didier pauses. "I suspect he did this to himself." I say nothing. I cannot confirm nor controvert his theory, since I have no recollection of the event. I was not there, and that is what terrifies me. "I'll be back in a minute," Didier says, and disappears. I take a breath, quieting all my voices, and inspect the corpse's exterior, noting every detail to be stored in my hall of recorded deaths. I observe the blackish toes, the atrophic genitalia, the missing fingernails and molars, all expected signs of the unique condition of the body carried in life. There are only two things out of the ordinary: a clear puncture on the anterolateral neck, and a series of thin black marks, divaricating from both eyelids. The former is clearly the immediate cause of death, but the latter may be an underlying one. I am mulling over the potential significance of the discoloured vessels when Didier returns with the houseboy in tow. A silent young man hands me my bag, then watches intently as I don my gloves and mask. I would like to ask him a few questions, since, in my experience, servants often have a better grasp of the goings-on of their masters than the masters themselves. But I know he cannot answer me. I address Didier instead. Tell me what happened. He fidgets as I peel back an eyelid to examine the blackened conjunctiva. Well, he starts, he fell ill about a week ago. Maybe more. Influenza or some such, perhaps. We didn't think much of it. I did not either. Strange, I mutter. The body's pupils shine with a disturbing colour, but I do not know if it is a result of trauma or a chemical reaction. One voice suggests a simple post-mortem or pacification of the cornea, while another suggests an infection. Images of my books open to their relevant pages appear before me, but I cannot focus on the words at the moment. These eyes are occupied. I found it strange as well, Didier continues. He was the last person I'd expect to see so ill, but he was showing his age of late. He took to bed for a few days. How many? 3, I believe. My father's fit lasted as long. I reach for memories of the past week. They are filled with nights of blurred, confused malaise, consistent with a seasonal virus. The symptoms are familiar to me, and not particularly worrisome. I have been ill before. No human body is impervious to invasion. Time of death, I ask. I'm not sure. Emile, this fellow here, found him the morning before last at about 6. He was still warm. I glance back at the servant. His dark eyes are fixed on the corpse, wide but dry. He crossed his arms, distress evidenced only by one grey hand tightening to a fist. What do you know about these marks? I ask. Didier's gaze falls to the corpse's sunken cheeks, and the colour drains from his own. I don't know anything. His eyes were darkened for a fortnight, maybe. I didn't look closely at them. I presumed he was tired. Each time he came to my father's room, it looked a little worse. With a sound that could turn the hardest of stomachs, I scoop out the body's left eye. It does not yield easily, and as I tug it away from the clinging extraocular muscles, a few ropes of dark fluid drip from the discoloured sclera. The black hair-like substance that I cannot identify clings to the severed optic nerve. The socket is tangled with the stuff, and it holds fast when I apply my blunt forceps. My mind fills with theories and memories of necrosis, gliomata, masses of hair I sometimes pull from children's stomachs, but each thought dissipates as readily as it appears. Behind me, Didier squirms. I know he does not enjoy sights like these. Even when he ascends the tower to help clean his father's tubes and replace his filters, he cannot hide his aversion. But he lingers to answer my questions, shuddering with cold and discomfort. Did you notice any uncharacteristic behaviour? I ask, prodding the mysterious substance. He acted as if he had a headache, and he was shivering quite a bit. He was not entirely present at the end. He muttered to himself, but he often did that. That sounds correct, I say. Fatigue, myalgia, blurred vision, impaired cognition and communication are common symptoms of 1,000 non-fatal pathogens. Foolishly, I did not consider the possibility of a more malicious infection. After exploring the optic canal, I managed to grip the growth with the tips of my forceps. It resists me at first, but I twist, plucking tiny tendrils from walls of connective tissue. A substantial part of the thing pulls loose, and the hairs widen, meeting in black confluences towards what must be the body of some sort of organism. With a soft popping sound, I pull it from the bone, past the socket, and into the cold air. A muffled gasp escapes Didier's throat. Then another, quieter exhalation tumbles from Emile. "A container, please," I say, as dangling black offshoots twitch at the end of my forceps. The servant fishes a thin file from my bag, angling it with mercifully steady hands as I place the creature inside. By the time I secure a lid over the glass and remove my gloves, it is already dead. Voices spell out caution and curiosity in equal measure. Some propose the hair-like process, a fungal hypha. Others suggest tactile flagella, and still others are unsure, turning the pages of 1,000 biological texts as they scour the breadth of my knowledge. All, however, spiral towards a similar, terrifying conclusion. It appears I have a competitor.